Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News for this Monday. It's the 26th day of August, 2024. And as always, we have some more important stories to pass along to you that have come across the wire in the last few hours. Now, this first one is tremendously interesting. Israel is said to push the United States to present some type of credible military threat on an attack on Iran's nuclear sites. In other words, tell us what you're going to do. Give us a credible outline of what you plan to do to help us destroy these nuclear sites. Now, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, tells us, not surprisingly, that 90% of Hezbollah's rockets were fired from civilian areas. This is the case normally. And by the way, Hezbollah has been firing some more rockets today toward Israel. MBS, Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman is seeking the U.S. and Israeli assurances in a huge Saudi deal amidst fears of backlash. And this is an important one to discuss because of Saudi's role in the last days Bible prophecy. And it continues. Mediators continue to push for a breakthrough in the Gaza ceasefire talks. When will they ever learn? All right, let's look at these headlines. Number one, Israel is said to push the U.S. to present some type of credible military threat for an attack on Iran's nuclear sites. The IDF says that the generals today were just presented with an ongoing combat plan against Hezbollah during the war and operational plans for the future. So, in other words, Israel's laying out to the U.S. what their plans are. They discuss security and strategic issues regarding the expansion of operational tools and the strengthening of regional partnerships as part of the response to threats in the Middle East. The IDF will continue to deepen its relationship with the United States Armed Forces out of a commitment to strengthen regional stability and the coordination between the two militaries, the U.S. military adds. Now, here's what's really fascinating. Channel 12 News reports that in some of the discussions that are focused on Iran, Israel has expressed its desire to see the U.S. finally come through with its years-long commitment to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear state. And what it would require is this: a credible U.S. military threat or military action against Iran's nuclear facilities. Could you please present something to us? Because this needs to take place. The network also reports that the U.S. has told Israel that it is keeping its armada in the region for the coming weeks due to heightened tensions. Now, this idea of the U.S. presenting a plan along with Israel to destroy Iran's nuclear sites is something Israel has been wanting for a long time. And basically, the U.S. seemingly is promising it, but never coming through. Because let's face it, they do not want to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities. Sad to say, but this is the case. And so, for whatever reason, the U.S. continues to lag behind and not really present anything and not really be that interested in some type of plan to get rid of these facilities in Iran, which, let's remember, have said very clearly that number one, they want to destroy first and foremost the little Satan Israel with a nuclear weapon. The number two, the big Satan United States of America with an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile. And so we are both in the crosshair. So you'd think the United States would be interested in stopping this, destroying the nuclear facilities of Iran. But evidently they're not. So Israel continues to press, and we see this not happening. So how is this going to resolve itself? We do not know, but it's very interesting to see that Israel is pressing for this. And it's not surprising that at least the Biden administration is dragging its feet on this. All right, our next headline: 90% of Hezbollah's rockets have been fired from civilian areas. Now, this is what's typical of the fighting of these different groups of Iran, of Hezbollah, the Palestinian Authority, when they were fighting the PLO, Islamic Jihad. All these terrorist groups in the Middle East do this. They fire their rockets and drones from civilian areas, and they're doing this in Lebanon now against Israel. And the reason being, they're hoping that when Israel fights back and shoots back a rocket, it'll destroy some type of civilian facility, whether it be a kindergarten, a mosque, a hospital, a school, whatever it might be, near where they fired their missile, and then they can get the world press looking at it and blaming Israel for killing innocent people and how dare they do something like this. This has been typical, going on for years and years, actually decades. And so we're not surprised. So what Israel did, interestingly, they provided an infographic displaying the proximity of the aerial threats launched by Hezbollah to mosques, schools, UN facilities, and other civilian locations. According to the IDF, much like Hamas, Hezbollah systematically abusing the laws of war by using both human shields and civilian locations to perpetrate its terror attacks against Israeli civilians. And again, they resumed attacks today as fires broke out across northern Israel. This is a day and a half after the major assault. The terror group launches waves of drones and rockets, forcing the Galilee residents again into shelters, with bushfire breaking out near Ayilat Hashahara and the IDF conducting strikes in southern Lebanon. So it continues on. All right. This next headline is also interesting in light of last day's Bible prophecy, because we know Saudi Arabia is one of the groups that will not be part of the ongoing invasion of the invasion that takes place with Russia, Iran, and Turkey, but they will be disputing it. So it's interesting to see this headline. MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, is seeking the U.S. and Israeli assurances in a Saudi deal amid fears of backlash. In other words, they want to have a deal with Israel, the United States. They want to protect themselves, of course, from Iran. Here's the story. Saudi Crown Prince MBS demands U.S. and Israeli commitments on a Palestinian state. There's the problem, citing security fears as he negotiates a historic deal. On August 14th, the U.S. digital news medium Politico published an exclusive report. It was based on accounts from three separate sources which have been privy to talks between Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, and the members of the U.S. Congress. These talks were the latest in a series of detailed discussions that have been taking place for years between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. They began during the presidency of Donald Trump and preceded the Abraham Accords. Over time, the shape of a complex agreement of major significance has emerged, clearly aimed at boosting MBS's ambitious program for securing Saudi's future development. His Saudi Vision 2030, launched in 2016, aimed at breaking the nation's total dependence on oil and promoting additional means of developing the nation's potential. In exchange for commitment by the U.S. to Saudi Arabia covering, among other issues, security, technical assistance with developing a civilian nuclear program, and investments in areas such as high tech, Saudi Arabia, and here's the key, would limit its dealings with China and normalize its relations with Israel, which would obviously be huge. MBS, though, has one provision before agreeing to breathe life into the draft deal. In line with long-standing Saudi policy, he required firm approval from Israel for the establishment of a Palestinian state. This stark condition has been somewhat modified during the negotiation process. MBS now requires the inclusion of an agreement of a credible path towards a Palestinian state. Now, despite widespread global support, including that of the U.S. for a two-state solution, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has so far refused to countenance this, fostering the development of a sovereign Palestine. It could, as he has pointed out, bring Iran-sponsored terrorism into the heart of Israel and place Tel Aviv and Ben Gurion Airport under permanent threat of attack. And this is the story that we've done for years and years and years, why a Palestinian state would never work, because that close to Israel, you could have one of these missiles launchers you put on your shoulder that the terrorists could use. And near Ben Gurion Airport, they're near in Tel Aviv. They could attack both from very close range. Just one person with a shoulder arm missile, and this could cause unlimited and horrific damage. So, this among other reasons why you can't have a Palestinian state in your backyard, because of the idea from these terrorists that Israel needs to be destroyed. So, what's fascinating though, they're pushing for this deal. Saudi needs the deal. Israel wants the deal. They want to have some type of relationship with Israel where there's at least an agreement between them. And this fits perfectly with what we know the Bible tells us in Ezekiel 38, because when the invasion happens in these last days led by Russia, along with Iran and Turkey, there comes a protest from Sheba and Dedan, and we know that geographically equals the modern day Gulf states. They're protesting the invasion. Now, they're not part of it. Now, likely they're protesting as to why are you doing it, not why aren't you letting us be part of it, as some people have argued, but why are you doing something like this? But of course, they will not get involved militarily. Nobody will. And that's when it looks like Israel has had it. They're attacked from four different sides, and no one comes to the rescue. There's no superpower that's going to help Israel at that time. The United States is a non-player. And it looks like all is lost. And that is, of course, until the God of the Bible intervenes and destroys the entire armies that come from the north, south, east, and west. We document this fully in our book, 25 signs. We're near the end, signs 9 through 11, where we talk about this last day's invasion of Israel. Plus, we have an entire book on the subject called the Ezekiel 38-39 invasion, which we, encourage you to look at, download. It's from our website, Educating Our World, on a free download, but it explains all what's going to go on and how the stage is being set so intimately, miraculously, to take place sometime in the future, where people are gathering together. They're all in the right unions right now. To do this, you've got the Russians along with Turkey and Iran working together for the first time in history. And they're going to be the three groups that are front and center, with Russia leading the parade there. So it's fascinating. That's why the Saudis, recognizing this, and want their own deal with Israel and the U.S. And so we'll keep an eye on this, but it is interesting. But the Palestinian state idea is the one that kind of kills the agreement. Now we must go on with this every single day. Same old, same old. Headline number 4: Mediators continue to push for breakthrough in Gaza ceasefire talks. Mediators attempt to hammer out key aspects of a hostage release deal before moving on to Israel troop deployment in Gaza, where tensions are focused. A day after the Israeli negotiating team returned from Cairo, talks between the negotiating teams continued on Monday and will likely persist for at least the next 24 hours until a definitive conclusion on the talks is reached. The goal of the meetings last week in Doha and this week in Cairo is to hammer out all points regarding a hostage deal between Israel and Hamas. Now, this represents a new approach in the negotiations. Amid criticism of American naivete, where the sides will first agree on the keys to releasing the hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, as well as finalizing the issue of vetoing the release of specific prisoners in Israeli prisons. In other words, they want to do that first, not with the territorial issues that have been the sticking point. CIA Director Bill Burns, who was facilitating the talks on behalf of lame duck U.S. President Joe Biden, has instructed the parties to minimize briefings and maintain maximum discretion. However, the U.S. officials told the New York Times on Monday that bridging the gaps, such as control over the Philadelphia and Netzarim corridors, remains an elusive endeavor. How about an impossible endeavor? It's not going to happen. And so why keep talking? A senior Egyptian official told a local television channel that Egypt stressed in the talks it won't agree to Israeli presence on the Philadelphia corridor and the Rafah crossing. Well, Israel could care less. They seemingly are going to do it anyway, because this is for their own security, because since 2006, Egypt was supposed to be the country that kept the smuggling to nil, that didn't allow smuggling of munitions, people, weapons, whatever it might be, from Egypt into Gaza. And that's what's been happening for all these years. Now Egypt is squawking and saying, we don't want, Israel there to defend its own border, which is the only way Israel can be sure that they won't be, again, have an October 7th deal happen all over again. So anyway, the negotiating teams are discussing all the issues at hand, primarily the number of hostages to be released in the deal, the list of Palestinian prisoners to be released, etc., etc. The discussions also cover the map of IDF troop deployment in the Gaza Strip, but these other issues take precedence. In other words, they decided, let's do it this way. Let's decide first and foremost which hostage is going to be released, which murderers are going to be released, though they can go out and do it again as Israel has done so many times in the past. And they figure that'll be the way to get these things kickstarted and going. But as they say here, the talks remain in gridlock. But it says the negotiations haven't fallen through entirely. Why not? It should, but this is why they say they don't rule out the possibility that some type of summit may be required, where final decisions need to be made with both parties. Hey, Hamas is not going to agree to any decision that calls for their destruction. The idea for Benjamin Netanyahu basically is this, that Israel says, look, what we want is Hamas basically to be disbanded. They're no longer a military threat. No longer can they politically run Gaza. We have to have somebody running Gaza that is not going to be a terrorist organization whose charter calls for the destruction of Israel. It's just that simple. And so same old, same old. So the process is said it'll continue in the coming days, where working groups continue to deal with the further issues and the details. Well, again, I don't know how long we're going to hear these stories, but sooner or later, they're going to have to come to an end. It's frustrating, of course, for the families of the hostages, but when you have somebody like Hamas, which will not deal, which will not agree to any type of ceasefire or agreement, then how can you get a deal? Now we're told Sinwar, this is interesting. There's another story that he has been actually dressed as a woman, going through Gaza and hiding out amongst the people there. That's why they haven't caught him so far. And so we're still waiting to find out if they're going to make any concessions, and the answer is seemingly not. But every day that goes by, Hamas is getting lower on the supplies, lower on the manpower. They're not, replenishing what they have. So sooner or later, you think something would happen. Now, what's interesting from an Israeli point of view, they've been posturing and saying Hamas now in Gaza is pretty much taken care of. We just need to clean up some things. Our effort has to be in the north, in Lebanon, and deal with Hezbollah. That's what really needs to take precedence down. So it seems they're going to start moving towards that area and hopefully clean out the nest of terrorists that are there. And that will not be an easy job. So we'll keep an eye on all this. But the point is, like number 7 or seventh sign of the end, and our 25 signs were near the end, the continual search for peace. Israel can't win because whatever they do, there's always somebody fighting at them from some area. And right now, like we said, there's 7 specific areas which they're receiving fighting from here now in these last days. And it's sad, but it will continue on until the Lord Jesus Christ returns, because we know this from Scripture. All right, I'm Don Stewart. Again, thanks for watching. If something else breaks, if there's another huge attack, we'll let you know about it. Until then, may the Lord, as always, richly, richly bless.